McLaren is in serious conversations to bring Kyle Busch over to race in the 500 in 2023. Riccardo has shown interest to race for Project 91 in 2023, and Junior Motorsports will not jump up into Cup Series in 2023. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We've got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories to discuss here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to go ahead and start our paint schemes and sponsorship news first. Let's jump into those really quickly. The first paint scheme we're taking a look at is Chase Briscoe's 2022 Rush/Cummings scheme for Breast Cancer and Awareness Month. They're going to be seen, I believe, this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway or next weekend at Talladega. Pretty solid paint scheme, in my opinion. Not much has changed other than the breast cancer awareness symbol on the car. Other than that, I think this paint scheme looks very solid. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Daniel Hemrich's 2022 The Bin Score scheme. They're going to be seen this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. The only thing that's different about this car is the fact that it's not 14, it's 11. But I really like this paint scheme a lot. I liked it with Justin Haley's car, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is John Hunter Nemechek's 2022 Romco scheme. They're going to be seen this weekend in the NASCAR Xfinity Series race at Texas Motor Speedway. This is a really good-looking paint scheme, in my opinion. I really like it a lot, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Landon Castle's 2022 Spend Me scheme. They're going to be seen this weekend in the Cup Series race at Texas Motor Speedway. I like this a lot. Really excited to see Landon Castle does have a new sponsor and hopefully have a good run in this car this weekend. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Corey LaJoie's 2022 Shelton Energy Solutions scheme. They're going to be seen this weekend at Texas. I like this paint scheme a lot. The colors look really good. The number being red, I think, works really good on this car, and I'm looking forward to seeing on the racetrack this weekend at Texas. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is David Starr's 2022 Cantera Design Builder scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas. Pretty cool to see that David Starr has a new sponsor this weekend. I think the car looks very simplistic, and hopefully have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Jeffrey Earnhardt's 2022 Alst Forever Lawn scheme that we're going to be seeing this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. This paint scheme looks very solid in my opinion. Not much to say other than that. Hopefully Jeffrey will have a good run in this car. The next paint scheme we're taking a look at is Ryan Vargas' 2022 Reddit scheme. They're going to be seen next weekend at Talladega Super Speedway. This is a massive dub. This will be the first time that Reddit is sponsoring a NASCAR car since 2014 when they sponsored Josh Wise. This looks absolutely incredible, amazing to see, and great to see that Reddit is sponsoring Ryan Vargas at Talladega. It looks amazing, in my opinion. And the final paint scheme we're taking a look at is Alex Abay's 2022 Rock Energy's Emergencies scheme that are going to be seen this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. Looks very good in my opinion. Looks absolutely great. And I'm definitely really excited to see that they are going to be sponsoring him this weekend. It looks really good in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the purse money for this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway for the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series races as well. So for the Cup Series, it's $8,455,617, and for the Xfinity Series, it's $1,434,537. That is a much lower purse money considering that this is usually one of the biggest payouts of the year. That's kind of low for Texas Motor Speedway for the Cup Series and also for the Xfinity Series. Generally, for Cup of this track, they tend to get around 9 to 10 million, so it's kind of a surprise that those numbers are low, but that is the purse money for this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Pat Perkins. As it was announced yesterday, or 2 days ago when you're watching this, that Pat Perkins is going to be leaving his role of Vice President at Hendrick Motorsports, and he will still continue, though, working as a senior advisor. Pat Perkins has been working with Hendrick Motorsports for a very long time, since 1999. He's been one of the higher-ups at the team. He's been Vice President of Marketing at Hendrick for a very long time. So it's kind of disappointing that he is leaving, but he's been with the team for a long time, but he will, at least in some sort of capacity, continue working with the team in the long term. It's good to see that he will at least continue, but it's a shame he will not be the Vice President of Marketing, but it is what it is, and wishing him the best of luck long term. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Valley Star 300. As it was announced yesterday, or 2 days ago, that the Valley Star 300 is going to be broadcast on MRN and Flow Racing for this year's Valley Star 300. I believe the Valley Star 300 is going to be this Saturday, September 24th, which will be going on the same day as the Xfinity Series race at Texas Motor Speedway. This, of course, is one of the biggest late model events of the year and one of the most high-paying late model events of the year, and it'll be run on Saturday night. It's really exciting to see they're broadcasting at MRN and Flow Racing. I think more people are going to tune in. I might try to tune in that race. We're going to have to wait and see, but we're probably going to see a lot of good entries in there as well. Probably guys like Payne Sellers and Lane Riggs are going to race in that, and I'm really excited to see that they are for sure going to have that on those specific networks. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Mars. As it was revealed today that Mars is going to be sponsoring the Philadelphia Flyers in the Will Fargo Center in Philadelphia. So if you're wondering what Mars has been up to, why they're no longer sponsoring Kyle Busch and Joe Gibbs Racing and NASCAR in general, it seems like they're transitioning away from that and sponsoring the Philadelphia Flyers. Now, of course, obviously, a lot of people are going to be really skeptical on this move, but this move makes a lot of sense, right? It makes a lot of sense why they're doing this. It's going to cost a lot less money, and it's going to cost them less money to basically spend. So that's why I think that they are doing it. Is it controversial? Yes, that they are doing this because they're leaving NASCAR, but they're going to be saving more money, and they can focus on other sports. It's not a shock. I thought they'd be more and more sponsoring NFL, but it seems like they're transitioning over to the NHL. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Brian Barnhart. As it was announced today that Brian Barnhart has been hired by Aaron McLaren SP. Brian Barnhart has been a higher-up official in IndyCar and has been part of IndyCar for almost 20 years in some sort of capacity, and was one of the higher-ups in IndyCar and higher-up officials. This is a major pickup for Aaron McLaren SP, because Taylor Kyle is leaving McLaren SP at the end of this year to find some new endeavors in IndyCar. It seems like a lot of people think that he's probably leaving to go to another organization, potentially maybe with Chip Ganassi Racing perhaps. Brian Barnhart is a massive pickup for the team. I think he'll do an exceptional job. I think he's worked as one of the higher-up engineers at this team in the past and other teams in the past. So I think this is a massive pickup for the team, and happy to see that he will be joining Aaron McLaren SP in 2023. Really excited to see that for sure, and great to see that for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Garage 56. Now, I have not talked much about Garage 56 as of recently. And the reason is because I've seen a lot of stuff going on with it, but I really want to discuss about it. Well, Fox Sports and FS1 on Race Hub had a little bit behind the scenes around Garage 56. And I thought the behind the scenes was very, very interesting. Now, in regards to Garage 56, it's unclear what the plans are for Garage 56 and what drivers are going to race. I would assume that 3 drivers most likely, though, that will be racing Garage 56 are Mike Rockefeller, Jeff Gordon, and Jimmy Johnson. Now, of course, there is a possibility with the IndyCar schedule that could mess up Jimmy Johnson's opportunity to race in Le Mans next year, but I would think for sure Jeff Gordon and Mike Rockefeller are going to race since they're not in full-time racing currently at the moment, and Jeff Gordon's one of the higher-ups, but he's also been racing as well. Really excited to see what the future of Garage 56 is, though, and we'll wait to see what happens in regards to that in the future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. in the Dale Jr. Empire with Junior Motorsports. As today was announced that there will be a ton of executive moves that are going to be made, and there's a couple major ones that are happening. So Kelly Earnhardt Miller is going to become the CEO of all companies at Junior Motorsports, meaning that she'll be the CEO for pretty much everything in the Junior Motorsports landscape. Mike Davis, who's a co-host of the Dale Jr. Download, he will become the Dirty Mo Media president starting effectively today. And L.W. Miller, who is basically joining the organization to replace Ryan Pemberton, he will be the senior VP of Junior Motorsports. I think this is some really, really great executive moves. Kelly Earnhardt has been really associated with the Dale Junior Motorsports for a very, very long time, and is also kind of an advisor for these drivers as well. Mike Davis is an awesome co-host with the Dirty Mo Media Group, and managing that, I think he'll do a fantastic job. And I think L.W. Miller is really going to be great beneficial for Junior Motorsports, considering Junior Motorsports is going to need a new leader with Ryan Pemberton leaving to go find some new endeavors for next year. I think these are some really awesome executive moves, and I cannot wait for the future of Junior Motorsports in the Junior families. I think a lot of things that are going on with Junior's future is amazing, and great to see that we've seen some pretty cool executive moves, in my opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Greg Van Alst. As according to Mark Crystal, who works, I believe, at Front Stretch, he reports that Greg Van Alst is going to be returning to ARCA full-time in 2023. Greg Van Alst is an independent driver, but he's also been really solid in ARCA this year. He's currently in the top 5 in points and has some solid top 10 runs this season. He's a really, really good driver. It really sucks he doesn't have the funding and equipment to go out there and compete for wins, but when he does race out there, he gives his all and does really, really fantastic. And it's good to see that a driver is staying loyal to ARCA. It would be cool if he could jump off the trucks at one point and race, but I think racing ARCA, he could be a guy that really can help the series really, really grow, because ARCA really does, hopefully, can grow at some particular point. But it's really good to see that Greg Van Alst is returning to ARCA in 2023. It's really, really exciting and good to see that he'll be back. And it seems like we're getting higher competitive equipment cars for ARCA. Good to see that for sure. And I'm excited to see that Van Alst is going to be back in ARCA next season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the NASCAR Weekly Series. Now, there was a major dispute and an issue that kind of came up in the last few days. And Matt Weaver reported that he had been expecting a resolution for the Weekly Series when it comes to field stacking, among other things. Well, it was announced a few hours after he tweeted that Lane Race has won the Weekly Series championship over Peyton Sellers. He also now is the youngest champion in the history of the Weekly Series, as he's only 20 years old currently at the moment. He's been doing incredibly well, has won a lot of races as well. Lane Race, I think, is a future Cup champion in my opinion. And seeing him go out there and win the Weekly Series championship is incredible. Now, of course, he had withdrawn from some races that did play a factor into these issues. But it's really good to see that they've gotten these issues resolved so that we can see the series try to hopefully grow. The Weekly Series has been something that I think has generally been growing for sure. And it's good to see there's kind of been a little bit of a resolution for that. And good to see that Lane Race is the champion of the Weekly Series for this season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Stewart-Haas Racing. Now, there was a tweet that came out earlier this evening showing Gunther Steiner and Tony Stewart kind of having a little bit of a conversation. And there's a lot of talk. There could be a big partnership with the Haas F1 group. What is this partnership going to be? I am not really sure, to be honest with you. I really don't know. Maybe they're teaming up for something for the Circuit Americas race or Formula One, considering that's about a month away from now. I think there could be some sort of teaming up going on there. That could be something that's a possibility. Of course, we're going to see some Formula One drivers in the United States really, really soon, with the U.S. Grand Prix coming up here in the not-so-distant future. But, of course, Stewart-Haas Racing associated with the Haas F1 group. We'll definitely have to wait and see what happens for sure in regards to that. But it's really cool. There could be a big partnership coming. I think that's really awesome. And hopefully that whatever this big partnership is, it's really, really successful. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Agustin Canapino. As there was a tweet that came out from Agustin Canapino, and he was touring the Juncos Hollinger team. There's a lot of rumblings and rumors that he could be the driver of the second Juncos Hollinger ride. Now, of course, in 2023, Juncos Hollinger Racing is planning to expand to a two-car operation. Calamile is going to continue driving the 77 car, but who's going to be behind the wheel of the 78 car next year? Well, it seems like Agustin Canapino, who's been racing in Brazil and has been doing really successful in Argentina and Brazil as well. It seems like he is the favorite to drive that car next year. I think that Agustin Canapino has seen what he can do in some of the racing forms, and it would be cool to have someone from that kind of the South American presence. I think it'd be really awesome if he did come over and race in IndyCar. Now, of course, I do think there's other drivers in the series right now that I think deserve this opportunity more, but I think it would be awesome for sure if he did get a really cool opportunity to race with them. So we'll definitely wait and see what happens in regards to that, but it sounds like there could be some stuff coming, and he could be driving for that team next season. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the next-gen test at Homestead Miami Speedway. For the last couple of days, there's been a test going on at Homestead Miami Speedway on Wednesday and Thursday on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week at Homestead Miami Speedway. They did not stream the test, and Joey Logano on day number 2 was fastest at the test. There were some issues at the test from what I could tell. I think the 43 team had gotten into the outside wall, and a couple other teams had gotten into the outside wall as well. And Chase Sully has publicly said that this race is probably going to matter more than it has in the past. I think whatever we're going to see at Homestead again, I think when it comes to intermediate racing we've seen this year, I think it's been really, really good. This test wasn't really talked about too much, and I'm a little surprised that it wasn't talked about as much as it probably should have been. But I think there's reasons probably why it wasn't talked about as much. But that's a topic in regards to the next-gen test that is coming up that already happened. And I'm not sure. I don't know if we're going to see any more testing for the regular season, or the rest of the season, I should say. But I would expect that we're probably going to see some testing in the off-season for sure with some of the next-gen issues that we are going to get into here really shortly in this episode. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chip Ganassi Racing, as they revealed the drivers who are going to be the third drivers at the Petit Le Mans organization. So they've got 2 new drivers who will be part of these organizations. So Scott Dixon is going to drive a 0-1 car with teammates Renger Van de Zand and Sebastian Bourdais. And Ryan Hunter-Reay, who's kind of become one of the higher-ups at Chip Ganassi Racing and really an advisor for young drivers, he will be teaming up with Alex Lynn and I believe Earl Bamber in these cars. These are 2 drivers who have won championships in IndyCar and 2 drivers who I believe also have won overall in the Rolex 24 as well. I think, of course, Ryan Hunter-Reay has been a great addition. He's been with the team pretty much all year long. And Scott Dixon's also a great addition as well, as he contended for the overall win in the Rolex 24 earlier this year. I think he's a great addition. Scott Dixon nearly won a championship this year in IndyCar. It's really good to see that they're bringing him back, and we'll see if they do maybe race in the Rolex 24 next year. We'll have to wait and see what happens, because I do think that there's going to be some changes with them. I'm not sure if it'll be just Cadillac GTP or we'll see Chip Ganassi next year. We'll have to definitely wait and see what happens in regards to that, but those are the lineups for the team next year. Pretty awesome and pretty cool to see that that is a lineup for the Petit Le Mans race. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Yuki Tsunoda. As it was announced earlier yesterday that Yuki Tsunoda is going to be returning to AlphaTauri Racing in 2023 as expected. There have been some rumors and rumblings that maybe he was going to leave AlphaTauri, but of the 2 drivers that are at the team currently, Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda was more than likely going to be continuing to drive for the team. In a statement earlier today, I believe from Francis Haas, he says that Yuki Tsunoda is a really talented driver who has a lot of skills. Now, I'm going to be honest with a lot of people when it comes to Yuki Tsunoda. Am I surprised that Yuki Tsunoda is continuing to drive for the team next year? No, but it does not mean that he's absolutely perfect. Yuki Tsunoda has been with the team for 2 years. I'm going to be honest, I've not been entirely impressed with some of the things he's done. Now, of course, I'm not going to really go back to the incident a few weeks ago where there was a little bit of controversy there. I think it was in Belgium or another country, if I'm not mistaken, where there was a little controversy there. Yuki Tsunoda, I think, is a talented driver, but the guy's going to have to step up to the plate. And especially with some rumors and rumblings about Nick DeVries coming over, Nick's probably going to outperform because Pierre Gasly is potentially going to leave the team, or he could stay with the team. But I also think that Pierre Gasly also doesn't feel like he really wants to be with AlphaTauri Racing, and a lot of people thought that Colton Herta was going to be taking his ride at AlphaTauri this year. Yuki's going to definitely have to step up to play, but I do like Yuki still a lot. Do not get me wrong. I think he's a good driver. But Yuki is going to 100% have to step it up to the plate and really show what he's capable of to continue driving with this team. But I do think it's good to see that he's back next year. I think he's young enough. He's got time to really show what he's capable of. And hopefully he's able to show and progress and show what he's for sure capable of as a driver. I think he's a good driver. I really think he is. But he definitely for sure is going to have to step it up to the plate if he's going to want to stay long-term in Formula One, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dale Jr. once again. We do have one big story in regards to Dale Jr. and Junior Motorsports later in this episode, but we're going to talk about some comments Dale Jr. made in regards to the racing on the short tracks and the next-gen car as well. And this is from the first 18 minutes. Now, I can't really talk much about this, but Dale Jr. has kind of echoed a lot of thoughts that a lot of us and that fans have had and a lot of drivers have had as well. The short track racing this year has really struggled, in my opinion. I think some of the flat ovals have also struggled as well, and I think the road course package has struggled a little bit as well. So what can NASCAR do to fix this problem? Well, I think one of the things that NASCAR absolutely needs to do is they need to increase the horsepower on the short tracks as well. What people forget is that while this is a new car, these are the same engines that they used in the previous Gen 6 car. So they still have the same engine. So it's the same restricted 900 horsepower engine that basically is restricted down to 670. Short tracks need to be increased to 850 or 900, whatever the engine is. They need to increase them. The higher they go, I think the better the racing is going to be on the road courses and the short track as well. Safety also needs to be paramount. We've talked about the crappy-ass parts, and trust me, there's crappy parts on this car that do need to be resolved. But I do think the NASCAR is listening. They're probably going to try to fix these issues in the offseason, but it's not against us to go ahead and criticize. We are allowed to criticize the issues with this car, and just because we criticize the issues, it's because we all love the sport, right? We love what the sport is doing. There's a lot of things this car and the racing have shown this year. The racing's been great, but the car has issues that do need to be resolved. But I do trust that NASCAR is listening to us, and they're probably working on some stuff to fix this car. Trust me, I think they're probably working on it, and I do think we will have solutions to this car in the future. But I thought Dale Jr.'s comments were definitely really, really interesting for sure. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Denver and street racing for NASCAR and IndyCar. Now, this is not the first time that we've discussed the possibility of NASCAR and IndyCar racing on the streets of Denver. But Marshall Pruitt, in a recent podcast, I think it was a Dinners and Racer podcast that he does, he talked about this, and he says that Denver and NASCAR and IndyCar are actually in conversations and open to having a street race in Denver. This is not the first time we've heard this. We heard this, I think, about a year or two ago, back even 2 years ago, during the pandemic, where there were discussions about the 2021 and even 2022 schedules of potentially NASCAR racing in the streets of Denver as well. Now, do I think it will happen anytime soon? No, I don't think it'll happen at least for the next 3 years, because you have to remember that there is a race happening on the Chicago street course. But that's where the issues are going to lie. Here's the thing. One of the things I'm really concerned about when it comes to street racing, of course, is the fact that there is a lot of politics involved. And we've seen a lot of articles come out where aldermen from the Chicago area have been really, really frustrated. One of them being Brian Hopkins. We've also elected officials. Politics play a major role in street racing, which is why I'm very skeptical of another street race in Denver or even in Pittsburgh as well, like some IndyCar drivers have indicated. Am I a fan of street racing? Somewhat. I think street racing is cool enough, but I don't think the racing is always the greatest, even with some cars that do race really, really well. And we saw today from an article that came out, there were still some people complaining about that race. But going back to Denver, I think it'd be cool if NASCAR could race in the Denver area. But there's also a track in the Denver area called Pikes Peak International Raceway that hosts an IndyCar and NASCAR races. I think track will be perfect to run in. Yes, it could be issues. It's a mile up. There could be issues where we can see engine failures and engine issues and all that kind of stuff. But Pikes Peak is a track that NASCAR used to race at. There's a short track right there. I think as long as you do have Chicago street course race, at least for NASCAR, I don't see the reason to go race in a different city and race there. But it all will depend on how long Chicago stays around. Yes, they do have a 3-year deal to race from 2023 to 2025. But you also do have to consider the fact that we do have politics and we do have an election coming up for Chicago in 2023. I'm not in that area, but of course there is an election coming up in 2023 for that specific area. It's one thing to watch for sure. Trust me, I would definitely for sure love to see IndyCar or NASCAR race in the streets of Denver. I think it'd be really, really cool to race in that area and kind of race in that area near the west. It's really kind of not adapted. And NASCAR has talked about racing in Denver. I just don't know if we'll see it at least in the near future, but we'll definitely have to wait and see what happens if that does happen in the future. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about DGR Racing. Now, there's been something that's kind of been a little bit under the radar in regards to potential a truck series team that could be moving to Toyota in 2023. And the big reason is because Busch Motorsports, they're going to be switching from a Toyota team to a Chevy team. So they're going to be needing a place where the drivers could end up going next year. Enter DGR Racing. According to the Door Bumper Clear podcast, they are suggesting that DGR Racing could be switching back to Toyota in 2023. Now, if they do switch back to Toyota, which sounds like it's just a rumor right now, DGR Racing has been with Toyota in the past. They were with Toyota from, I think, 2018 or 2019 up until the 2020 season. And then in 2021, they switched to Ford. If DGR Racing does end up switching to Ford, which it seems a little bit skeptical considering David Gillen is the owner of the team, this would change a lot of things for a couple drivers. That mainly being Haley Deegan and Ryan Preece. Now, why those two drivers? Ryan Preece is a reserve driver currently for DGR Racing. So he would have to find a new ride for next year, most likely in the Xfinity Series, or if Front Row decides to expand next year in the Truck Series. And then you look at Hailie Deegan. Now, Hailie Deegan, I think she has a long-term future in NASCAR. And there's already indications, rumors, that she is going to make some select starts in Xfinity this year, at least one for sure. I think the big reason is because of this. But if DGR switches, this is going to be a really big shock. But it will at least be able to bring some drivers in. Guys like Corey Hyman to the team. Chandler Smith potentially. John Nemechek, if he doesn't go to Cup or Xfinity next year, he could potentially go there. But DGR Racing making a potential switch over to Toyota is something that I did not expect to hear. It's kind of crazy to think about it. It could be possible that we could see a switch for that team to Toyota, but it wouldn't be a shock or really a major surprise to me if that was to happen. But again, we're going to have to wait and see what happens if this does end up happening, DGR Racing. But man, will they stay a 2 or 3 car operation if they switch? Or are they going to buy all the KBM's equipment? I would assume they're probably going to buy up all of KBM's equipment if they do end up for sure officially switching. We're definitely going to have to wait for sure on this story and see what happens, but it sounds like it could be very, very soon we find out a team switching to Toyota, and it sounds like DGR Racing could be the team that is switching to Toyota in 2023. But also, we could see Ford run into problems because if you do have DGR switch to Ford, you're only going to have one major Ford team, and that is Front Row Motorsports. So there'll probably have to be a Ford team that does pop up, and FRM, Front Row Motorsports, is definitely in trouble right there because they'll probably be the only Ford team next year in trucks. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the first next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, when we talk about Trackhouse Racing here near the end of the episode with Project 91, but let's talk about Trackhouse Racing in the future of the team. There was an article, I believe, that came out either from Madden Stern or Racer.com talking about what Justin Marks wants to do with the team in the long run. And Trackhouse Racing has some pretty major ambitions that they are trying to follow through. And they have major ambitions. Now, Trackhouse Racing has been associated with dirt racing in the past. They actually have associated with Brent Cruz by sponsoring them. And they're also in Trans Am Racing as well, where they have their own team. They race dirt, and Justin Marks races for that team as well. And Brent Cruz also races for that team. But they have major ambitions. They want to race in IndyCar, in the Indy 500, and they also would love to race in IMSA as well. Let's talk about IMSA for a minute. I think IMSA is a little bit easier to get into. We've seen Hendrick Motorsports. They've had some interest. They want to race in IMSA. They're kind of associated with IMSA a little bit with that number 48 Allied Racing Cadillac, where Hendrick is kind of involved in that. And they could easily work with like a team like Chip Ganassi Racing, who's part of GM's Cadillac brand. They could probably work with them and get a team set up right there and partner up right there. Then you go over to IndyCar and talk about potentially racing in the Indy 500. This is not the first time we've heard Trackhouse Racing show a little bit of ambition about potentially racing in the Indianapolis 500. Last year, Justin Marks was on SiriusXM NASCAR Radio. I think it was with Claire B. Lang, if I'm not mistaken. And he said they would love to race Indy 500 and actually talk about maybe racing Indy 500 in 2022, but that never really came to fruition. If they're going to enter Indy 500, what team would they partner up next year or in the future? Well, I think it's very obvious. Chip Ganassi Racing. Chip Ganassi Racing is a team that Trackhouse basically bought up their organization from. They basically took the Chip Ganassi Racing Cup Series shop, and they bought up all the assets from Chip Ganassi Racing. Now, a lot of people are saying, well, Daniel, that doesn't make a lot of sense. They're a Honda team. Well, Chip Ganassi Racing, while they are a Honda team in IndyCar, they're a Cadillac brand and GM team in IMSA. So, and of course, Trackhouse, if they wanted to, they could become a Toyota team if they wanted to, or a Honda team. I think it'd be really cool, though, if they could partner up with them. And then I think it'd get a little bit more. Jimmy Johnson, I think, comes into mind of who could be a driver for the Project 91 car. I think that Chip Ganassi would drop the 48 car at least for 1 year. I think Jimmy more than likely is going to be back in Chip Ganassi Racing's IndyCar program next year. I think it's very possible that next year, Jimmy Johnson could race a Project 91 and do the double, drive the 91 Project 91 car, and then, of course, could drive in a car that's associated with Ganassi, but have Trackhouse there. I think it'd be really cool if this does happen, but the future Trackhouse sounds really, really promising for sure. I'm definitely for sure to see what the excitement of Trackhouse is. I think they're one of the most interesting teams in NASCAR. They've had a lot of success, and Justin Marks wants to be more and more successful. I think it's really cool that he wants to do that, and I think the future of this team is in really good hands with Justin Marks and Ty Norris and Pitbull running the operations for the team. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Junior Motorsports. Now, I kind of have reported on Junior Motorsports a little bit, and I'm not jumping up the Cup next year. Well, kind of got confirmed today that Junior Motorsports is not jumping up to the Cup Series in 2023. There have been some skepticism that maybe they were going to jump up the Cup in 2023, but it's very unlikely now they are going to do it. And I'll tell you why they're probably not going to do it. Charters. The charter money right now is insane. Adamson reported about 2 or 3 weeks ago that charters are worth $20 million. So they're extremely expensive to get right now, and it's going to be very hard to get in there, and that's why they're probably not doing it. Now, Kelly Earnhardt got interviewed and from 2024, and there is a possibility and a possible option that in 2024, we could see them jump up the Cup, but it will all come down to funds and, once again, a charter. Like I mentioned, charters currently at the moment are going for $20 million. So they're extremely expensive right now at this particular moment. Now, obviously, I think Junior Motorsports jumping up the Cup could potentially be more likely in 2024, though, and I'll explain a big reason for that. Big answer is Brandon Jones, I think, is a major, major key to if they're going to jump up. I think Brandon Jones is going to be the key, and I will explain why. Brandon Jones has sponsorship and funding backing him, and he's joining Junior Motorsports in 2023, taking over the 9 car for Noah Gragson, who, of course, is going to the 42 for Petty GMS Motorsports next season. Brandon Jones has sponsorship and funding backing him, and I think he's a very solid driver as well. He's one of the few funded drivers that comes in this series that I think actually does have some talent. It will be a championship threat. Brandon Jones, I think, also would love to race in the NASCAR Cup Series at some point. He's had some ambitions that he would love to race in Cup one day. Well, I think that if they're going to jump up the Cup, I think Brandon Jones would have to be the favorite to make the jump. Sure, you do have Sam Mayer and Justin Allgaier, but Sam Mayer could go to Cup in 2024 if Bowman doesn't return. And I think that Hendrick is grooming to bring Sam Mayer into the team. And then, of course, I think they would love to, for sure, Justin Allgaier and Josh Berry. Josh Berry, I think, would really be cool to have him there. And, of course, Justin Allgaier. It is a shame, though, that Junior Motorsports isn't jumping up next year, though, because I think it'd be fun for Junior Motorsports to jump up the Cup and increase the car counts. But again, the payout money as well when it comes to the uncharted teams compared to the charter teams. The charter teams get every bit of money, and then, of course, the uncharted teams get 1% of the funds. For instance, last year, Allmendinger got 1% of the funding when he won and got 30th place prize money that Rick Ware car got by finishing 30th place at Indianapolis. So, of course, a lot of these uncharted teams are not going to show up unless they're going to run really, really competitively. Do I think Junior Motorsports, if they were to jump the Cup, do I think they'd be competitive? Yes, absolutely. But I just don't know right now if they're going to be competitive if they do end up jumping up the Cup in the not-so-distant future. Is it 2024 as a possibility? I think there is, but it's not 100% a guarantee and a possibility that it is going to happen. But if it does end up happening, we'll talk about it, and it would be definitely cool if Junior Motorsports can jump up the Cup in 2023 or 2024, but it's very likely that Junior Motorsports is not going to make the jump up the Cup in 2023, but maybe in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the first of 2 major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. Now, this is not the first time we've talked about Daniel Ricciardo in regards to Project 91, but it was reported yesterday by Adam Stern that according to him, Daniel Ricciardo is aware of Project 91, and he knows that there is interest, but I think he's figuring out what his F1 deal is going to be, just as Mark said, of possibly running the Australian in a NASCAR race with Trackhouse Racing. Like I mentioned, this is not the first time we've heard the possibility of Daniel Ricciardo potentially racing with Project 91 and racing for them in 2023. Project 91, the goal for the team is to run 6 or 8 races next year. And obviously, Daniel Ricciardo, we already know at this point, will not be returning to McLaren Formula 1 in 2023. And it won't be even in McLaren's family in general next year, as he will be basically replaced by Oscar Piastri, who will be driving his car and will be teammates with Lando Norris next season. Daniel Ricciardo is also a NASCAR fan as well. He's been a fan of the number 3 car, which is why Daniel Ricciardo runs the number 3 car in Formula 1 right now. So obviously he really loves NASCAR in a sense. And last year with Dale Earnhardt's number, he actually basically drove that number and drove the number 3 Wrangler car around the racetrack at COTA before the race ended up taking place. So when you look at Daniel Ricciardo, he is a big NASCAR fan. Now, Daniel Ricciardo has openly come out and said that he's not a fan of ovals, and he's been talked about, maybe asked if he could race an IndyCar. He's not a big fan of ovals. Okay, so if Trackhouse has this Project 91 car, the goal is to mostly run road course races. So if he was to run with Project 91, he could race at a road course, which means that the Daytona 500 would not be a possibility, though I would say that if there's an option to race in the Daytona 500, I think he would probably have a shot at maybe running in it, though. I do think Julio Castroneves will probably be behind the wheel of that Project 91 car because that 91 car is available. Obviously, when you look at Daniel Ricciardo, I think Daniel Ricciardo coming to NASCAR would be big in many, many ways. Number one, it would get Daniel Ricciardo into the NASCAR world, and he's shown some interest in the past of racing in NASCAR. Number two, you would have a lot of mainstream attention and mainstream audience as well. That is one of the goals of this Project 91 car, is to bring a lot of mainstream audiences in from the Formula One world, and it will get a lot of mainstream headlines as well. Speaking of Formula One, a lot of Formula One fans who are fans of Daniel Ricciardo are going to be interested in watching the race that Daniel Ricciardo is in, meaning a larger TV rating across the world as well. And it will give a worldwide experience for fans who don't really understand NASCAR that much. It would get people to understand NASCAR a little bit more. Daniel Ricciardo racing in IndyCar and racing in NASCAR would absolutely be huge for the sport. You look at Kimi Räikkönen and the impact that had. Formula One publications were talking about this move for Kimi Räikkönen going over racing in Project 91. Some doubting, some praising Kimi Räikkönen, but of course, he's had NASCAR experience in the past before he got behind the wheel. But with the Trackhouse car, he was competitive. And I think while Daniel Ricciardo has struggled in Formula One with the McLaren team the last few years, I think a new breath of fresh air racing NASCAR would be absolutely huge for him to get behind the wheel of this car. Trackhouse Racing on the road courses has been exceptionally well. They have won a lot this year, with already scoring 3 victories this year with Trackhouse Racing, and 2 of those coming on a road course. Ross Chastain at Circuit Americas and Daniel Suarez at Sonoma, both getting their first career wins at those tracks. I think Ricciardo would probably be better than what Kimi Räikkönen has done, and he's got a lot of road course experience and has a little bit of advantage, especially if rain comes down like kind of did at Watkins Glen. I think that rain experience that he has would really benefit him as well. It would help out Dan Ricciardo as well, be used to this car a lot more. I really think Dan Ricciardo needs a fresh, kind of new fresh air, whether that's racing NASCAR or whether that's racing IndyCar. I think a new breath of fresh air for him next year will be racing in the Project 91 car. I think it'll be awesome if it does end up happening. Do I think it will happen? We're just going to have to wait and see. It depends on where he's racing in Formula One, but the rides are getting filled up very, very quickly, and I really am unsure right now if we will see Ricciardo at an F1 car next year. If not, Daniel, we welcome you to States. We're open, States. We're open to racing in here, dude. And hopefully, if you're watching this video, which you're probably not, if you're watching this video, I do hope you do consider racing for Project 91 in 2023. I think it would be awesome if you do race for Project 91. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the final major story in today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kyle Busch in the Indy 500 conversations. Now, we've talked about the Indy 500 conversations multiple times on this channel, but it sounds like we're getting really, really close to a potential deal being done for Kyle Busch to race in the Indy 500 in 2023. According to Adam Stern, this was reported earlier today, McLaren is in serious conversations about running a 4th IndyCar entry for Kyle Busch with sponsorship from Menards per Jenna Fryer. Holy crap, it is sounding more likely that Kyle Busch could be racing Indy 500. Now, this is not the first time you've heard rumblings and rumors about Kyle Busch potentially racing in the Indy 500. Back in 2017, Kyle Busch actually had a deal to go race in the Indianapolis 500 in a Team Penske car. But because they are a Chevy organization and Kyle Busch association with Toyota, and Joe Gibbs Racing not letting him go race Indy 500, Joe Gibbs did not budge, and Kyle Busch did not race in the Indy 500. Instead, I believe Julio Castroneves ended up, I think, replacing him in that Indy 500, or another driver did end up replacing him in the Indy 500 that season. Kyle Busch has also had ambitions to race Indy 500 as well. If he does truly race Indy 500, he will not be the first Busch brother to race Indy 500. Kurt Busch has also raced in the Indianapolis 500 back in 2014 for Andretti Autosport. Big reason being is because Andretti Autosport was actually supposed to join NASCAR in 2013 in a Dodge car, but that never really came through. And Kurt had a deal to race Indy 500 in the 26th entry. And Kurt Busch was extremely impressive, finishing in 6th. I think Kyle Busch is a generational talent and one of the legends of the sport. And very similar to another driver that I'm going to talk about very, very shortly, Kyle Busch is one of the greatest race car drivers of all time. Everything he stepped into, he's done really good. Whether that's dirt cars, whether that's a Cup Series, he does extremely well. And there's not many drivers that can do what Kyle Busch is currently doing at the moment right now. Now, of course, Kyle Busch has struggled, but he's going to Ricciardo Racing, which is a Chevy-branded team as well. And McLaren SP is a team that really wants superstar-level drivers. They got Juan Montoya to race. They were trying to get Jenson Button to race in the car. They've had other drivers that have shown ambitions, like a Kevin Magnussen, who's shown ambitions. Kyle Busch is a superstar-level driver and would bring a lot of audiences in. And that's where I'm going with this. If you bring Kyle Busch in the Indy 500, you will have one of the largest TV audiences in the history of Indy 500. I guarantee you. And here's why. Kyle Busch is one of the few NASCAR Cup Series drivers and drivers in NASCAR that has superstardom level still to this day. Of all the drivers remaining in Cup, there's not a lot that really have a superstardom. He's one of the few that many people in the mainstream know. Whether that's for the good or for the bad, that is to be determined. Kyle Busch will bring a lot of people in, and you would have a lot of that international presence watching as well with Kyle Busch being there. Now, obviously, I don't know if Kyle Busch will be the only one that does race Indy 500 next year. Let's talk about Kyle Larson as well. Like, Kyle Larson obviously is not the main guy in this, but I'll talk about Kyle Larson as well. Kyle Larson also has shown interest in wanting to run the Indianapolis 500, and he could race with Team Penske at any given point, considering that Team Penske is an option. It sounds like Penske really wants Kyle Larson. Just imagine, in 2023, you have Jimmy Johnson, you have Kyle Busch, and Kyle Larson all racing against each other. Past, present, and future Hendrick Motorsports drivers who are currently in the past, the present, and even the more present as well. This would be a massive, massive branding for all three to be in the race. It would be huge, and huge TV audiences as well. And we already seen some people on social media that are saying if that they see Kyle Busch race Indy 500 next year, they're going to go out there. And Kyle Busch, I think, has a very good chance to become the first driver to complete the double since, I believe, Tony Stewart in 2001. We haven't seen a double done in a very long time and completed. Kurt Busch came very close to doing it in 2014, but had an engine failure with less than 100 laps to go in the Coca-Cola 600, but was more than likely going to end up doing it if not for the engine failure with around 98 to 97 laps to go in the race. I think Kyle Busch is capable of doing it. And I think Ricciardo Racing will give him the benefit because he's allowed to run for a Chevy-based team. McLaren SP seems like the most likely candidate for Kyle Busch heading into next year. Now, when it comes to Indy 500, if Kyle Busch truly does race Indy 500, what are my expectations? He'll be a contender for the win. McLaren SP in the past has really shown the pace and speed to win Indy 500. Felix Rosenqvist was this close to winning Indy 500 earlier this year, and Pat O'Ward was also very close to win the Indy 500 this year. I think they've got the capabilities to win and the pace and drive to win. This is such a huge story. Kyle Busch race Indy 500, I think, will be huge for the sport of not only NASCAR, but for IndyCar as well. If he completes the double, I think it will be extremely historic for the sport. How likely do I think this is happening? It sounded like it's very likely going to happen, and man, I've been wanting to see this for a long time. Kyle Busch race Indy 500. We've been talking about this Indy 500 news. NASCAR drivers who could race in it. Well, Power really wants him to race in Indianapolis 500. And it's sounding very likely at this point that there's a very strong possibility that Kyle Busch is going to race in the Indianapolis 500 in 2023. Hope it does happen. So anyway, that is near today's long NASCAR in Motorsports video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you can be notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links in the description below over that. Comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think Kyle Busch is going to race in the 2023 Indianapolis 500 with McLaren SP? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts by Riccardo potentially racing for Project 91? Let me know in the comments below. Tomorrow on my channel, I'm not really sure what's going to be coming out. I might do a little bit of quick race review, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. Sunday, of course, will be the Cup review from Texas. God, I'm not looking forward to that race. The race is probably going to suck. I'm probably going to need some alcohol to drink during that race. And then probably throughout next week, there'll be some NASCAR news trickling out, and we'll talk about all of that. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.